I was looking at my favorite app to use to find free items when I came across the ad for this one. It was one of 2 mowers being given away at the same household, so I was very lucky to get to this one in time. Now for the most part it is complete, and by that I mean it doesn't seem to be missing any parts. Unfortunately this mower does not start, so we'll have to try and figure out what's wrong with it and see if we can fix it. In today's video, we're going to be looking at this Troy-Bilt lawnmower, and the problem is that we just picked it up and come to find out it won't start. At least that's what the ad says about it, but at this point I don't know why they'd be lying about a mower they're trying to give away for free. Now I'm going to try and repair this lawnmower, but yours might be different, so this might not work on yours. So if things are not working out for you, like in this video, please ask about it and I'll be glad to answer your questions. So the first thing that we notice about this mower is the duct tape holding the end of the brake cable together. Not only that, but the brake cable itself has seen better days and will need to be replaced. On top of all that, there seems to be something wrong with the handle itself because it's not moving like it should be. The reason this is important is because without a working brake handle and cable, we won't be able to start this engine. So to deal with this situation, I'm going to bypass the cable with a zip tie, and only when we know this project is a good investment will I replace it. The only problem is that with the safety system bypassed, I'll need a way to stop the engine, so what better way than to use another zip tie to help stop it. Now if you need one of these cables, you'll need to find the sticker somewhere on the mowing deck where it says the model number. And with that information, you'll be able to find the correct part number. Without it though, you could end up with the wrong part. The last thing we need to check before we start the engine is of course whether or not there's any fuel and oil in it. Now there seems to be plenty of gasoline in the fuel tank, and even though the oil looks to be low, we should be okay for a test start. So it would seem that the ad for this mower was correct. It didn't even try and start. Next, we're going to physically prime the engine with fuel and see if the starting issue is related to the fuel system, the ignition system, or if the problem is with the engine. I don't know if you heard that, but the pull rope was pulled out of my hand. Here it is from a different angle so you can see it happen. So we have a big problem. When trying to pull the rope to start the engine, the handle gets pulled right out of your hand. But it only seems to happen when you put fuel into the carb. If there's no fuel in it, it can easily be pulled over without any worries. What this tells me is that the ignition timing is way off, and in this case I think it seems to be advanced, or basically it's happening a lot sooner than it's supposed to be. Now an easy way to confirm this is to take off the blade and inspect the cutting edge for any sort of damage. If there is a gouge on the edge of the blade, that would explain why the timing is off, and that's why it's acting the way that it is. The only problem is that I don't see any sort of damage on the edge of the blade, but then again, the blade looks fairly new, meaning it could have been replaced. So if I had to guess, I'd say they hit something hard with the mower and probably bent the blade. They then replaced the blade with a used one, thinking that they had fixed the problem, but they didn't. Now, could they have used this mower with a different blade and a firm grip on the handle? It's possible, however my guess is that this is what motivated them to get rid of it. Now before I go on with this project, I'm going to give it a quick spray and rinse. Not only will it make it look better, but it'll help me to spot any other problems that might be hiding under all that dirt. And besides that, we also need to get to the top of the engine, and cleaning that area will also help to keep the engine from overheating. Just as a reminder, you don't need to do this type of cleaning, but if you do, you also don't need to spend too much time either. And if you're curious, I'm using a degreaser from my favorite freight store, but almost any sort of degreaser should work. Just remember to follow the instructions for its use, and also be careful when using it, that way you won't get hurt either. So what exactly happens when you hit something with the mower and it stops the engine? While the stop is abrupt, and even though the blade and crankshaft stop moving, the flywheel has a different idea. The flywheel can't stop as quickly as the rest of the engine, which then puts a lot of stress on the flywheel key. Now some keys are made of an alloy and not steel, and that's done on purpose for this very reason. The sudden stop will then shear the key, but unfortunately it causes the flywheel to be in the wrong orientation. And since the flywheel's position to the crankshaft is important to the ignition timing, a sheared key will cause the timing to happen too soon and cause the pull rope to act the way that it is. So why not make the key out of steel then? Simple. Instead of a 25-cent key being damaged, a much more expensive flywheel is. And in this case, the key is sacrificial, and to be honest, it makes a lot of sense. So it's been a couple of hours, and with the help of my leaf blower, most of the water is all gone. Next, we'll need to get to the key, which is right under this nut and washer holding the flywheel to the crankshaft. Now you don't need to use an impact to take off this nut, but it makes it a whole lot easier. Once the nut and washer are out of the way, we should be able to see the top of the key and the key seat in the crankshaft. The top of the key should be lined up with the key seat, but as you can see, it's not lined up, but instead off to the left. This will advance the ignition timing for the spark, and that's why the rope is being pulled back when there's fuel in the carb and not any other times. Once the flywheel is free from the crankshaft, we'll then replace the damaged key. So after removing the flywheel, we find part of the key, meaning the other part is still in the seat. Now I do have one problem, and that is I'm not swimming in flywheel keys. So we'll have to use a steel key as a substitute until I get the right one in the mail. But I will let you know that if you use a steel key instead of the correct one and the mower hits another hard object, you might just end up with a cracked flywheel instead of just a broken key. Of course, you're free to replace the key with whatever you want, a piece of steel, an alloy, or even a piece of hardwood. It really doesn't matter. If it's your mower, you have every right to. However, I do not plan on keeping this mower, so I'm going to replace it with the right key. Even though I'm quite sure we fixed the pull rope issue, another cause would be the valve clearances being off, so we need to check them. And to make it easier to rotate the engine, I'm going to take out the spark plug. I'm also going to check on the gap for the plug while it's out, just to make sure that it's not too far off. Now, I like to set my air gap to 25 thousandths of an inch, but you're free to set it to whatever you feel is right. Now, before taking out the valve cover, I'd recommend tilting the mower back on its rear wheels for a couple of minutes. This will allow the oil in the valve cover to move back to the oil sump and help to keep from making a mess. Next, we need to rotate the engine so that one of the rocker arms is all the way down while the other one is loose. After that, we can then check the clearance for the loose one. So to start off, I'm going to see how the 5 thousandths of an inch feeler fits in the clearance, and come to find out it's much too loose. That means the clearance here is a lot bigger than 5 thousandths of an inch, but out of curiosity, I want to find out just how far out of tolerance it is. So it turns out the clearance for the upper rocker arm is 13 thousandths of an inch, which is more than I want it to be. Next, I want to rotate the engine so that the other arm is the loose one, and we'll check the clearance there as well. This one, however, is a lot easier to do because it turns out the clearance is already at 5 thousandths of an inch. What that means is that we don't need to adjust the lower arm, but we need to rotate the engine again so we can adjust the upper one. So to make any adjustments, we'll need to hold the large adjusting nut while loosening the jam bolt. We'll then slide the 5 thousandths feeler gauge into the clearance and then turn the nut while moving the feeler gauge until it almost gets stuck in the clearance. Now if it does get stuck, then just turn the nut counterclockwise a bit to free it. Once the feeler barely drags in the clearance, tighten the jam bolt. And after you get done with all your adjustments, go back and check the clearances one more time just to make sure. Now that the clearances have been checked, we can then replace the valve cover and all the fasteners. Now this would have been a great time to do a compression test, but from everything I've seen so far, I'm not worried that the engine is worn out. The next part I want to look at is the carb, but I'm not going to take it off the engine just yet. Instead, I'm only going to drop the fuel bowl so I can examine it. So it turns out the inside of the fuel bowl looks fantastic, meaning this carb is in great shape and may not need to be taken off, at least not right now. The float is also not stuck, but it's hard to tell if it's sitting where it needs to be in the up position. Next, we'll try and clear all the openings in the jet, that way fuel can move through it and through the rest of the carb as well. Now you can find these carb jet cleaning wires online, but you can also use a small diameter wire or even guitar strings if you have some. Once the jet is clear, you can then use some compressed air or carb cleaner to help clean the openings. Then we can start to put the carb back together again. Now, when we go and try and start the engine and we find out that we do have a carb problem, then yes, we'll have to take the carb off for an inspection and more than likely a cleaning. The other reason to take the carb off right now would have been if we took the bowl off and found a lot of varnish or corrosion in there. Unfortunately, I didn't have room to collect the fuel from the bowl to see if it might have had water in it, but with the way things looked, I don't think it did. So I'll give you my guess as to what happened to this mower later on, because right now I'm still not sure why they gave it away. So there is one more important piece that we need to look at, and that is the blade. We need to make sure that it's balanced, otherwise the vibration from it could cause some damage. I like to check if they're out of balance before I sharpen the blades, that way while I sharpen them I can make my adjustments while I do my grinding. Now you don't need to use a cone balancer like this one, a nail in the wall is better than nothing at all. The last thing we need to do is to install the blade, get it on the ground and see if it'll start up. Now the good news is that it started without any issues and the self-propel is working well too. But the bad news is that we still need to fix a lot of stuff before we can sell it. We still need to fix the brake handle and also replace the brake cable. We still need to lubricate all the contact points and also the all-important oil change. But at least we fixed the pull rope situation, which leads me back to what I think happened to this mower and why it was given away. I think this mower had a minimal maintenance routine, your basic oil change, deck cleaning, and blade sharpening. But just like so many other mowers, the heavier maintenance items were neglected, like the valve clearance checks and even the cable maintenance. Now I do believe they hit something hard, but not recently, and ended up changing the blade and kept using it even with the rope being yanked back. I think the straw that broke the camel's back was the brake cable finally breaking, even with all that duct tape. That's when they said they had enough and threw in the towel, and now it's my turn to try and make it useful again. We'll see how it goes in the next video, because if the parts are too expensive, then I might just lose money on this one. So my question is, would you have kept using a mower where the pull rope is being yanked back by the engine? For me, I wouldn't want to, but for some, as long as it starts and runs, it's not a big deal.
Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.